Good morning. We're going to call our meeting to order. I'd like to welcome everybody to the regular board meeting for the Nags Head Board of Commissioners for December. We're going to start with a moment of silent meditation. Amen. If you'll join us in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Do want to note that Mayor Pro Tem Romali is out of town, and also that today is the last meeting for our videographer, Bob Boyer. Bob, thank you very much. You've done a great job at getting our news out to the public, and we really appreciate it. We wish you the best in the islands. Our first item is the adoption of the agenda.
Move to adopt as presented.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. This is the time in our meeting that we set aside for audience response. If the members of the public wish to come and speak to the board, if you'll come up to the podium and give us your name and address, and we'll listen patiently. Anybody? Mr. Moore?
Good morning, everyone. I'm George Moore from 119 Altoona Street in South Nags Head. I know you're limited to how long you can talk, and as an auctioneer, I usually babble on too long, but I'm going to cut it short this morning for the main reason that today is the day of our luncheon sponsored by our group for the police, the fire, and the EMS folks. That's being held at the Whalebone Restaurant. The misprint in the paper said noon, but it is 1 o'clock, and hopefully all of you will talk fast so that you can get done and attend the luncheon. It's very important that you do, and we'd be happy to see all of you there. We have a wonderful response from our different merchants in town, and we have a lot of very nice gifts to be given away at door prizes. So please join us and have a wonderful luncheon. The second thing on my list is to make a comment about the sand removal, and I have talked to Ralph Burrell about it. I think the job that was done this year exceeded anything else that I have seen in 20 years of living here. I understood that, you know, sand piled up on certain streets and people were they couldn't move in, they couldn't move out, but it was impossible. There was no place to put the sand. But they got to work on it quickly, they got it cleared, and I think they deserve a lot of credit for having done a fine job of moving that sand. And we thank them for doing it. Finally, I come to you with a very important request. Recently, Pat and I got a contract to sell one of our homes. That is home 118, which is across the street from my 119 where we live. Some time ago, and I forgot, and I guess it's the age that makes you forget, but we signed a settlement agreement with the town that should either house ever have to request another building permit or repair permit, that it would not be granted, the houses would be torn down. We already agreed, and the town tore down 3 of our homes, leaving Pat and I really in a financial situation that's tough to live with. We had really hoped for the sale of this home, and we thought that that would carry us for the remaining years. What we need to have, and it came up at the contract of these people to buy, when they found out this agreement had been signed, they said, oh, bye-bye. We're not going into a deal like that. Now, you can't blame them. So I'm here today to ask you to please reconsider, revoke that settlement agreement in favor of Pat and I, because the beach renourishment has turned the whole ball game around. We had absolutely no damage in the last storms. In fact, this last one we just had was a godsend because it put about 4 or 5 feet of sand under the homes, protecting them in a much better situation than ever before. So with that in mind, I would ask that you please, when the town manager, Cliff Ogburn, presents that to the commissioners and the mayor and so forth, that you consider our situation and you vote in revoking that settlement sheet that we signed. Thank you for your time. Come see us at the luncheon. It really is an important one for all of us. Thank you again.
Mr. Moore, thank you for your work on the Community Watch and all the members of the Community Watch. It is a great service to the community. Other public comment today? Anybody else? Okay, we're going to close public comment. Our next item is recognition of employees.
Morning, Mayor and Board and everyone. It's my privilege and honor to stand up here and present the Employee of the Year. To start this off, we're going to have each department head who nominated a person to come forward and tell you why they nominated that person. This is one of my favorite times of the year because it gives us a chance to showcase and shine our employees and how valuable they are to us, and be able to recognize it's a very tough decision that the department heads have for recognizing one when so often there's so many that deserve recognition. But this gives us an opportunity to bring before you those that have excelled and rise above and are worthy of noteworthy and can be presented with the nomination. So I'm going to ask first that Ralph Burrill, this is no particular order, this is randomly selected. We'll have Ralph Burrill to come up and present to you his nominee.
This is new to all of us. Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. I'd like to present to you Mr. Ron Watson, who is the Employee of the Year in Public Works and our nominee for the Earl Murray Jr. Award this morning. Mr. Ron has been with us for about 5 years. If you remember, he was up here not too long ago to get his 5-year of recognition. In that 5 years that Mr. Ron has been with the town, he has shown us that he is a very valued employee. The last couple of years, Mr. Ron had taken it upon himself and had put in a program to rehabilitate and a preventative maintenance program on our four-wheelers. Every year, Mr. Ron takes all the four-wheelers that the lifeguards use and police uses and painstakingly takes each one of them apart, cleans them, repaints them, repairs them. And if any of you have ever worked on anything that has been on the beach for any length of time and know how it is to get the rusty bolts and stuff apart, you know what kind of a project that is. And Mr. Ron does that with about 10 four-wheelers every year. We have seen a great savings since he has started doing that in preventive maintenance, also in the longevity of our four-wheelers, which have saved us, quite a bit of money in replacement cost. Mr. Ron also, no matter whatever task that he's asked to do, no questions asked. He's usually the first one here in the morning at Public Works and one of the last ones to leave. So without anything else to say, other than we know he is honored to be here this morning because he told us that he took his Saturday night bath last night and put on a clean T-shirt. I'd like to present to you Mr. Ron Watson.
Morning. I nominated for Administrative Services Christy Blevin. Administrative Services is responsible for collecting the primary revenue sources for the town, and Christy does that for both the water fund and stormwater. Her collection rate is virtually 100%, with many fewer collection tools than we have for taxes. Each month, she bills half of the town's customers, sends second notices, makes courtesy phone calls, and then cuts off those customers that don't pay their bill. She's primarily responsible for applying the board's policy on water to our water customers on a consistent and fair basis. What she does isn't glamorous. It doesn't get her picture on the front page. But what she does do is provide good customer service to the town's water customers. With the economic conditions of the past several years, we've seen an increase in foreclosures, bankruptcies, and delinquencies. Despite those circumstances, Christy has done a good job of adhering to the town's policy and interests, while at the same time working with those customers with special circumstances to give them the flexibility that their circumstances may warrant. She has a good understanding of what normal water usage is and what isn't, and she's able to let customers know when they have something unusual occurring with their usage so that it can be promptly addressed. We changed accounting software during the past year, and water billing continued without a single interruption in service. Christy is not hesitant to solve her own issues and problems as they occur, and doesn't rely on someone else to come in and fix things for her. It isn't always easy telling people what they don't want to hear, or that you can't give them everything they want, but Christy does give them plenty of patience and assistance, answers their questions, listens to everything they have to say, and then tries her best to accommodate their situation to the extent that she can within the confines of the town's policy. What makes her exceptional to the department and to the town, in addition to those things, is her willingness to always step in and lend a hand in any way and in any capacity that she can to anything that the department needs. She's a team player for both the department and for the town of Nags Head, and those are my reasons for recommending her for Employee of the Year for the town. Christy Blevin.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Board of Commissioners. I'm very happy this morning to bring forward a nomination for Dabney Shelton as Employee of the Year. I bring this forward on behalf of the Planning Department as well as Carolyn Morris, our town clerk. Dabney has a consistent approach of positive attitude, caring for customers, and doing the very best job she can given any set of circumstances or plans. She's worked for the town for 6 years. She's been an invaluable asset to our department and to the town as a whole. This was especially, I just want to point out, evident in her response to Hurricane Irene, where she helped us reorganize our permit process to do a special intake for hurricane damaged properties, and to facilitate that process through CAMA as effectively as possible. And she was out there doing damage assessment even as her own home was flooding. Anyway, I get a little emotional when I talk about my staff, especially Dabney, who's been so welcoming to me and certainly really helped guide our transitional period in the planning board. Dabney, thank you very much for everything you've done. Thanks. Go ahead.
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. It's my privilege to come before you this morning to introduce our Nags Head Police Officer of the Year and the nominee to you for the Sergeant Earl Murray Employee of the Year Award for the town to be Sergeant Doug White. Doug was hired by the Elizabeth City Police Department in 1983 by the late W.C. Owens, and after working there for approximately 2 years was hired by Nags Head in July 1st, 1985. Since that time, he has served in our patrol division and is currently a patrol sergeant, where he was promoted in 2000. Doug holds an advanced law enforcement certificate, criminal investigator certificate, is a basic EMT, and is a state certified law enforcement instructor for driving, defensive tactics, and firearms. He is also our liaison for Community Watch and our team leader with our emergency response team. I've had the occasion to work with Doug since I've started in 1990, and Doug is a close co-worker of mine, and I also consider him a friend. When I was looking back over his file from many years ago, I didn't count them, but I'm guessing there was 15 to 22 letters that had been received on Doug's behalf over the years. And when I looked at them, there was one from a lady that was from out of state that Doug had to deliver a death notification to. And she wrote in a letter to the police department thanking Doug for his attitude and how he had to deliver that message. A colonel from a law enforcement agency in the state of Virginia thanking him for his response to a vehicle accident that his son was involved in. When I was looking at those, and I reviewed every one of them, there was a common theme in each of it, and that was Doug's professional, courteous, and caring attitude, regardless of what it was. A vehicle accident, delivered a death notification. He even got letters for writing people tickets. I mean, that's
Good or bad?
that's that attitude that we see that they're coming out in Doug. Before I get into this year, about why I nominated Doug, I do want to mention that he is here today with his wife, Darlene, who's sitting up at the front. We'd certainly like to thank you for coming and joining Doug on this very special occasion. When we talked about the team leader for our emergency response team, 6 officers. Doug leads those group of officers, and Doug has been instrumental in the reformation, equipping, and training of our emergency response team. They've been supported for the purchase of supplies and equipment by the town, but also by our Nags Head Community Watch Association. Doug's experience and level of training that he offers to that team is just invaluable. Also, for the Nags Head Community Watch, I mentioned that he's our liaison to that organization. The National Night event that was held on a very rainy August night this past August, I talked to Doug about wanting to revamp and do some changes to our community, our National Night Out. And I gave Doug some direction of where I wanted to go, and Doug, along with Officer Laurel Gearreath, really worked on that event and made it more interactive with the public. We had more displays, and the overall response was very positive from our community. In closing, I just want to say that Doug is truly an asset to the town of Nags Head and the Nags Head Police Department. He's very quickly, though, to downplay his contributions. But it's just a pleasure to come before you today to present Doug. And Doug, congratulations.
Morning, Mayor, Board of Commissioners, Mr. Manager. It's my pleasure to present Fire Captain Shane Height for the Earl Murray Jr. Scholarship Award, or scholarship, you're not getting any money yet, almost. Award for the year for the town of Nags Head. I think all the department heads can agree that it's always difficult to come up with one person who shines the most brightly. We've all got such great staff, and they do such an excellent job. And so looking for the person that's the biggest catalyst for change and improvement and making a positive difference is really a difficult choice. Fire Captain Shane Height came to the top for me this year. He's a dedicated 11-year employee of the fire department. He's committed to creating and maintaining the town as a safe and livable community, one of our goals. Shane is adept at working with employees and citizens, and his ability to deliver great customer service is appreciated by the public. Fire Captain Height possesses excellent organizational skills, is forward-thinking, and is successfully focused on providing results. He practices good leadership, excels at problem-solving, and functions well under pressure. And we know that there's a lot of pressure being in control of a fire situation, emergency, on the beach, motor vehicle accident. He continuously steps to the plate with a can-do attitude and does an excellent job and saves lives. Captain Height regularly returns to off-duty emergencies and attends any emergency-related training events. Shane is responsible for all equipment and apparatus maintenance in the fire department, and that's identifying a problem and making sure that he identifies somebody to get that fixed or doing the repair work himself. He works with his crew and coerces them into helping get really elbow deep into everything possible, from changing generators to working on fire pumps and doing all the things that might take quite a long time to complete and take the stress and strain off other departments. Captain Height recently researched hours to come up with a competent specifications plan for a new aerial apparatus, and he did an excellent job with that, and we're happy to be seeing that come to a close as we wait for that new piece of equipment. Captain Height actually graduated from Coastal Carolina Community College this year. So he received his associate's degree after working for many long years. And with that being said, yeah, that wasn't enough. He immediately signed up for an emergency management preparedness degree. And so now he's back in the pipeline trying to get that level of torture, right? Okay. As a level 3 fire inspector, which is the highest level that the state will allow and accommodate, he is responsible for plans review. He regularly provides fire prevention services and inspections. Most of the time, he'll leave the business and people come away smiling. So, you know, they're happy about that, and he's a very competent fire inspector as well. Captain Height is a town safety officer, and we know the safety guy doesn't always get a whole lot of pats on the back. It's tough to come into a work site and tell people this is the way you can improve, make things a little bit better. He is the leader of that program and does it very successfully. The town's accident and injury rates have gone down under his leadership. He has renewed our partnership with OSHA this year, and we are currently pursuing an OSHA Sharp certification that we formerly had, and we're moving in that direction. He is responsible for the safety committee, the management of all those meetings, all the safety inspections and accident investigations in the town. Since 2003, the Nags Head Fire Department has maintained an excellent child car seat safety program. With the Outer Banks Hospital in our district, you can imagine a lot of people leave with newborns and immediately come right to the fire department to get their car seat installed. That's a life-saving and wonderful program that certainly does provide injury protection and prevention for all the children and infants that need it. We annually review about 100 car seat installations, and we maintain a reputation as a community resource for child safety, and that's primarily due to the oversight of Captain Height. In closing, Captain Shane Height is courteous and demonstrates the good conduct expected of an officer in the fire department. He is a grounded, dedicated family man, and when off duty, finds time to spend quality time with his 3 wonderful daughters. I'm pleased to recommend him for this award and feel that his work performance is an excellent example of career commitment for the fire department, the community, and town. Fire Captain Height.
We want to say thank you to each one of the department heads for a great presentation. I think it's obvious the reasons why these folks were nominated. I'd like to extend my gratitude and appreciation to each one of you for the job that you do. And the department heads nominate. Those nominations go up before the board, and you discuss and deliberate to make your selection for the Earl Murray Employee of the Year. So I'll turn it over to the board.
Government is largely based on it's a people business, and the people that you have working in government are the ones that deliver the quality of government that you get. These folks have been recognized by their managers. I know they present a great example to their peers as well, and it's a real honor to be selected for this. Y'all, I've got a couple of certificates, if I may give you. We're going to let the suspense build on the Employee of the Year. Other comments from the board before we?
I just told our attorney this is probably the hardest job we have all year.
When you have a lot of good nominees, it's hard to make a decision, but thanks to everybody that was nominated for doing the job that you do.
Thank you very much.
So with no further ado, it is a difficult decision every year, and it's a real pleasure and an honor to present the Sergeant Earl Murray Employee of the Year Award. It's a beautiful plaque. To Sergeant Doug White. Speech? Want to give a speech, Doug? You can have the microphone.
Thank you very much. I certainly do appreciate it. I didn't see this coming, and I didn't expect it. I've enjoyed my time here at Nags Head, and I've got a couple more years left, and I certainly do appreciate the board. Town manager, thank you, Cliff, and I certainly do appreciate it.
This is one of the more pleasurable things that we do, Doug. Thank you. We're going to have a brief recess for pictures. We're going to come back into session and continue with just a little bit more recognition. Commissioner Cahoon?
Good morning, Mayor, Commissioners. A couple weeks ago, Commissioner Walters, myself, and Town Manager Ogburn were at the yearly convention of the NC Beach and Inlet Waterway Association down in Wrightsville Beach. And during the last day of the meeting, they always give out awards to the board member that's contributed the most. Several awards they give out during that day. And the last award that they gave out was the Local Government Partner of the Year, and they'd always do it during the luncheon. And quite to our surprise, the Local Government Partner of the Year was the town of Nags Head. And we were all shocked, surprised, and extremely happy. It says a lot about the recognition for the town of what we've done. We got our beach nourishment project done. We've supported the endeavors of the NC Beach and Inlet Waterway Association to do better with inlet management, the inland waterway, trying to get that cleared, as well as getting people to work together to keep our beaches healthy. And I would say our town manager has done an awful lot. So Cliff, not only to the town, but I'd like to present this award to you as a director of the NC Beach and Inlet Waterway Association for all that you've done the past year or so. Thank you very much.
Well done, y'all, and thank you for attending and bringing that information back to us. It's been a valuable organization to be a part of. Our next item is the consent agenda.
Motion to adopt.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Is there further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Our next item is a public hearing to consider adoption of the zoning ordinance text amendment regarding the minimum 300-foot setback for metal structures adjacent to major highways. Mr. Lighty?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. At this time, we will begin the public hearing to consider the zoning ordinance text amendment, which was initiated by the Planning Board and would amend Town Code Section 48-88, which deals with building exterior wall finish. And we'll begin with the presentation of the staff's analysis provided by Kelly Wyatt.
Good morning, Mayor and Commissioners. As the attorney noted, in recent meetings, the Planning Board has discussed and has now initiated a zoning ordinance text amendment to Town Code Section 48-88, building exterior wall finish, as it relates to what is essentially a 300-foot setback for the use of metal structures adjacent to the major right-of-ways within the town. The discussion arose following a fire at the Ark International Church Family Community Center, in which it was determined at that time that the 300-foot setback would restrict similar construction and placement of that structure. Specifically, the section reads that the exterior finish material of buildings located in whole or in part within 300 feet of US 158, US 64-264, NC 12, or NC 1243 shall not be compromised of more than 10% metal siding or metal wall covering excluding the fascia, maximum 24 inches in width, door and window trim material. As always, text amendments are not site-specific, but in order for the church to construct a similar building, we would need to take a look at the 300-foot limitation. We would note that it is not uncommon for churches to utilize large spaces for community activities, events, and meetings. So while metal structures may not fit in with the Nags Head architecture, they do serve the town well, as in addition to other towns, in many important and beneficial ways. So in addition to language regarding the 300-foot setback, we're also including revised language for the intent portion of the ordinance. The current language offers the history and goals of the ordinance, but it's drawn from an older version of the land use plan. While the goals remain the same, the 2010 land use plan incorporates slightly different language, and while this gives the town the opportunity to clean up the ordinance, it makes it more user-friendly and provides a more concise representation of the goals. While recognizing the importance of maintaining the town of Nags Head architectural guidelines and character, staff submits that a reduction in the setback for metal structures may be appropriate when a substantial buffered area is being provided or the structure is otherwise substantially screened from view. Staff would recommend adoption of the Planning Board recommended ordinance, which is included in your packet, that reduces the 300-foot restriction down to 250 feet as with substantial screening, and we would also recommend incorporating those revisions as recommended by the town attorney in the summary sheet. I'm happy to answer any questions.
All right, any questions for Ms. Wyatt? Yes, ma'am.
In reading the planning board minutes, and I was trying to find them, I think some of the members had a question about what the definition of substantially buffered meant. You know, to one person it might mean something to another. Did you all come up with a definition?
We did not necessarily come up with a definition to be included in the ordinance, but what we did do is go ahead with the town attorney's recommendation to include a mature buffer, to include that language, as it would mean a 50-foot wide buffer. Ms. T can...
Yeah, we didn't define substantial visual, I'm forgetting the term exactly. Buffering, but we did go ahead and define mature buffer. And you'll see in the ordinance it relates to this idea of a mature buffer, which is landscaping that's already in place and is of such height and establishment in terms of tree caliper that we know it's there, it's visually significant. And then the other thought with substantially obscured or substantially shielded from view was this idea that maybe there might even be another building in front of the metal building. There could be some other obstruction that would block the visibility from the road. So we weren't really sure how to define that one, but mature buffer, you'll see there is a definition in there. And we're certainly open to, I think Mr. Leidy had some very good recommendations for us on that as well.
Yes, Ms. Cahoon.
When will the recommendations from the attorney show up in the proposed ordinance?
We submit our ordinances as part of the agenda packet, and then Mr. Leidy reviews them just prior to this meeting. But we can certainly incorporate those right now in this moment in terms of when you make your motion, you can incorporate his, or if you want us to go back and rewrite the text for a new meeting, we could do that as well.
I just want to make sure that those comments get included before we adopt an ordinance, not after we adopt an ordinance.
So you're saying let's see it in writing, actually up here on the screen before we vote on it?
I think it would be better for us to vote on something that's complete and not incomplete, if we could.
Do that, Michelle. Include some language in there.
The language is actually in our packet.
Right.
It's in the cover sheet, yeah, we could move it over.
Sorry.
Okay, we can go.
Eh,
We all want to see them in writing before we vote on them.
Yeah. Well, and I was going to say, if this is a Word document, I can show her where to insert that.
It's not Word, is it, Michelle? Yeah, it is. Oh, it is.
We can keep pushing on with the public hearing, though, and they'll work on that.
Any other questions for Ms. Wyatt or Ms. Teague at this point?
Several members of our planning board are also here if you have questions for them.
Yes, if there's no more questions for staff, let's move on to see if there's any comment or any information from the various members of the planning board who are with us today that you might want to, if you have anything to provide on this matter. Okay. Any questions for the planning board? That would be helpful. If not, does any member of the public wish to comment on this proposed zoning ordinance text amendment? Does the board wish to receive any further information through presentations at this time before it begins its deliberations on the proposed amendment? Nothing further? All right, at this time we will conclude the public hearing on this item and the board may begin its deliberations.
What's the pleasure of the board? Get the clarification on here and take the attorney's recommendation on cleaning up the language, I assume.
I think so.
Sorry, Mayor.
No, it needs to be on there.
I think we all want to see it in black and white before we vote on it. Or red, whichever it is.
From Bob.
I have a question, but if I don't know the answer, I don't want to. I was curious as to how many metal buildings we have that this would apply to.
Am I going to still skip all this? Keep after Bob, but another bond.
Beeman? Beeman's. Is that church a metal building?
Nags Head.
Isn't it in back?
But, what?
I don't know, that's why I asked. Is it? I think it is. I think it is.
I don't know, too. But we must have done an exemption of some sort for the church. Wait. I'm not sure. No, it's not St. Andrew's Chapel, but.
It meets the 300 feet from the street. It does meet 300 feet.
Sure. 300 feet's not that far.
No,
It's a football field.
I'm sorry that Willow missed the awards from North Carolina Beach Inlet and Waterways. She came in after you'd finished. You need to tell her that she needs to look at the tape. Because that's nice. You know, we get her update on the realtors thing and the homeowners, and I enjoy reading that. She's only made one mistake in all the years I've been reading it. That I caught.
I'll tell you, the presentation on flood insurance was pretty scary with what they're talking about doing to the rates. The flood insurance is really scary. Well, yeah, all of it is.
Yes, sure did. The only other thing was, and I don't know if, I didn't hear where the planning staff recommended this, but is the
John, does it effectively incorporate your suggestions on there?
It does include my revision to the substance of the language in Part B there. The other recommendation that I made, and I didn't hear whether staff agreed with this or not, was to simply eliminate the Part A paragraph where it has the language regarding the purpose and intent, which was greatly whittled down to a one-sentence statement of intent. That's still not necessary either, in my opinion. I don't think you need that intent paragraph. And if you did that, you would simply have this, not that paragraph, the paragraph that was just shown where the lengthy sentence, that would be the body of 48-88. You wouldn't have an A and a B. And my point is, in the ordinance itself, you don't need, and this is what I think the director was pointing out in her memo, you don't need all that intent and purpose language that's set forth there in A. And in fact, you don't need any statement of intent and purpose. If you're going to have a statement of intent and purpose regarding an ordinance, really should be included when it's adopted in the ordinance preamble. That would really be the best place to put it. It doesn't really need to be in the body of the ordinance itself. So that was just the other comment that I made.
So
Well, it's nice to see us removing words, John.
Yes.
You're saying remove A completely? where
Yes, that's correct.
The intent.
Mm-hmm.
And then B would become A.
It would just be, I think it would actually be the body of that section.
You wouldn't need an A or B, just.
Because that'd be the only paragraph under it.
But it would start with generally.
That's correct.
Well, I'm fine with that.
Everybody clear on what we're looking at? Entertain a motion?
I'm going to make a motion that we adopt this zoning ordinance text amendment to Town Code Section 48-88, building exterior wall finish to reduce the minimum 300-foot setback from elder buildings adjacent to US 158, US 64, 264, NC 12, or NC 1243, with also moving the Part 2A intent up into the whereas section, and with a comment, whereas the purpose of this ordinance is to enhance, promote, and protect the town's architectural image and heritage, which would be deleting A and B, and B would just become separate,
Stand by itself.
standby.
Okay.
Right.
Everybody clear on the motion? Is there a second?
Second.
We have a second. Further discussion? All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. Motion passes unanimously. Thank you, John. Our second public hearing this morning is to consider adoption of a zoning ordinance text amendment submitted by Darnell Tillett to amend Town Code Section 48-445, Commercial Outdoor Recreational Uses Overlay Zoning District.
All right, Mr. Mayor, at this time, we will begin the public hearing to consider that zoning ordinance text amendment, again with the staff's analysis presented by Kelly Wyatt.
As mentioned, the applicant here is Darnell Tillett. He's before you today to request an amendment to several portions of the town code to accommodate a new use of outdoor amusements and games. The first requested amendment is to establish where and how the use is permitted. The applicant is requesting that this new use be permitted in the outdoor commercial recreational uses overlay district and as an accessory use to go-kart tracks only. Secondly, a parking standard has been proposed of 1 parking space per 3 amusement ride seats, 1 parking space for each 2 employees associated with amusements, plus required parking for any other use. So this proposed parking standard would not affect the parking standard that's currently in place for the go-kart track. This would be in addition to what's already required for the go-kart track. The third requested amendment is to provide exclusion for the height of the amusement rides. The applicant is requesting that the maximum allowable height for amusements be established at 60 feet from natural grade. The applicant submits that permitting this new use would provide additional recreational activities specifically for younger children who may not be eligible to participate in some of the other recreational activities which are already being provided. There are 3 ordinances included in your packet. The first ordinance is the request as the applicant desires it. The second ordinance is a staff drafted ordinance for your consideration, and the third ordinance is the planning board recommended ordinance. There are some differences in each. The main difference is that in the applicant's request, he is specifically asking that the use be an accessory use to go-kart tracks only. And planning staff and the planning board feel as though the use should be an accessory use not only to go-kart tracks, but to any other outdoor recreational use that's within that district, any other land or water-based use. Furthermore, the planning board went on to recommend that an ordinance should impose a minimum setback of 1.1 times the amusement ride height from all property lines and rights-of-ways for rides that exceed 35 feet in height, and would also impose a minimum lot size of 2 acres for any parcel wishing to provide amusements on that site. While staff agrees that additional recreational opportunities will enhance the community, staff would also submit that the proposed use should not be restricted to go-kart tracks only and should be considered an accessory to any recreational use within that district. Planning staff concurs with and recommends adoption of the planning board recommended ordinance, keeping in mind that additional language will be brought forth not only to the planning board but to the Board of Commissioners concerning lighting of the amusement rides. Happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Tillett is here as well.
All right, any questions for Ms. Wyatt at this point? Yes, ma'am.
Kelly, what is the height restriction in that area now?
35 feet is the maximum height.
And is it my understanding that the lighting currently is not part of the ordinance?
It isn't. And when the applicant made his request, he did not impose any restrictions on the lighting. Planning staff, when they drafted theirs, we left it sort of open-ended and broad, saying that the applicant would need to propose something that should be reviewed and approved by the planning board and the Board of Commissioners on an individual basis. The planning board felt like we needed something black and white in writing as to what the lighting standards should be. So the planning board asked staff to go back, research that, and bring something to them at their December planning board meeting specifically relating to lighting of amusement rides.
The reason I bring this up, I think that a lot of the kiddie rides do have some type of blinking lights commonly used in other amusement areas. And I believe our ordinance here in Nags Head restricts blinking lights, is that correct?
We do prohibit flashing lights. One thing that Mr. Tillett had mentioned, and I've noticed, is a lot of the amusement rides, specifically Ferris wheels, may not have blinking, but more of the starburst effect where the lights sort of phase out. I don't know if the board would consider that to be flashing or blinking, or if you're more interested in just a static light as opposed to any type of movement in the lighting. So that's what staff is going to go back and research, but you're correct. Currently, flashing, blinking lights are prohibited.
And the last thing I want to ask you, how close, let's see, this ordinance is proposing, staff's ordinance, not the applicant's, is proposing that any parcel that has currently an established recreation use would be eligible to do something of this sort?
Correct.
Correct. That's an established recreation area.
Correct.
Okay. How close are, let me see. Okay. How close is the closest parcel to a residential area?
That might actually be Full Throttle, but right across the road from Full Throttle is that subdivision on Lakeside, I believe.
If you go diagonal, it's
Just north of your site.
just south of it is Carson House, and then right east of Full Throttle is the shopping center.
Mm-hmm.
And then a little bit north of that is Wings, and then you got Forbes. And then Darnell, I'm going to ask you to come to the we need to get your comments on the
Okay.
on the record.
See, there's there's Full Throttle, and there's this residential subdivision right here.
Right, but isn't that zone commercial?
It's developed residentially.
Right. I mean, as I think we just answered that. I mean, east of us is a shopping center. Now, just south of there, across the road, are some houses. I don't know what it's zoned. Then north, staying on that same side road, you have the Wings, then you have Forbes, right? Yeah. And just north of us, you know, when the overlay district was first formed or whatever, that was Andy's Travel Park, and I'm pretty sure it's zoned commercial. Now, you know, yes, houses have built in there, but they chose, you know, to build residential and commercial, knowing it's next to a overlay district. And of course, south of us is that's all the overlay district.
Before we go further with Mr. Tillett, are there any more questions for Ms. Wyatt? And if not, we'll allow the applicant to go ahead and comment. But is there any further questions for Ms. Wyatt? Yes, ma'am.
Clarification, Kelly. The property that has the street that runs east to west, that has the houses that don't face 158, those houses were developed after the area was developed as an overlay recreational district?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
All right, any other questions for, yes,
Ms.
Mr.
White,
Mayor?
what lighting rules would govern this if nothing else was passed on lighting? And how did we had an amusement park. Was that just grandfathered?
Yes, essentially it was. Right now, the current lighting ordinance is the only regulation, which there is the section on prohibiting flashing lights, and then it also states that recreational activities in the overlay district shall be limited to 10-foot candles in terms of lighting. But in looking at Ferris wheels and rides such as that, I'm not sure that there's an easy way to determine 10-foot candles on a
Now, this is
child
just
drive.
a comment, but I think trying to limit the lighting on amusement park rides and make it look like it's not an amusement park ride is just crazy. It's going to look like an amusement park ride no matter what you do to it. So I'd encourage us to look at being very liberal in that regard, because it is what it is. And it's not like a cell phone tower that you can make look like a tree. It's going to look like a Ferris wheel no matter what you do to it. So that's a comment.
Mr. Cahoon?
Question, if the board were to adopt any one of these ordinances as presented today, are we setting ourselves up for a conflict by having this lighting piece laid out in the future? If we were to adopt it and allow, it's kind of a follow-up, if we were to adopt and say we want to have amusements, but we haven't adopted any lighting standards and we're only going to apply the 10-foot candles to it, are we really saying, yeah, we want you, but we're not going to let you have it? And that kind of sets up, to me, a conflict area.
I'm not sure if that's a conflict, but I can say that any existing recreational use that wanted to take advantage of this ordinance, it would require a site plan amendment because they're all conditional uses. So it's our intent to get the lighting standard to the planning board at their December meeting and hopefully back before this board in January. Within that amount of time, the conditional use site plan amendment process would not have taken place anyway. So there will be a process that anyone wanting to take advantage would have to go through, and it would be my hope that in that time frame, the lighting ordinance would be established and adopted.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Did you have a question for Ms.
Yes, and I'm a little confused now by your answer, because if you establish a lighting ordinance, I think what I heard you say is each applicant that wants to put a kiddie ride into their recreation use would have to come on their own accord with their site plan, right?
Correct. Well, it depends on which ordinance you adopt. Mr. Tillett was seeking this as a accessory use. Actually, no, I'm sorry. The ordinance specifically states that any combination of outdoor recreational uses automatically kicks it into a conditional use. So any combination of recreational uses will send it through the conditional use site plan amendment process.
So the lighting ordinance that the board would approve eventually would then be effective for any applicant? It would be the same for one would be the same for all?
Correct.
So if you allowed blinking lights or starburst in this applicant's request, then it could occur on any property that has an established recreation use, correct?
Yes, ma'am. It would not be site-specific
Right.
to Full Throttle.
Okay.
But it would be specific to the overlay district, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, but there's a lot of land in the overlay district. I want to make sure that we all are on the same page, that if this is approved, and I understand that the applicant originally requested this for his site, and while I understand why staff took it to the entire overlay district, recreation use, I'm not going to say that I agree with you, but it's here. I just want us all to be on the same page that whatever we approve is not for this site specific. It's for anyone in the overlay district that already has a recreation use.
Yes, Ms. Walters.
Regarding the lighting to be determined in the overlay district, would it apply to any business, or would there be something different for amusement parks or amusement rides or things of that nature?
Yeah, it would be my assumption, and Ms. Teague may want to jump in, but I believe we would be creating a specific standard for outdoor recreational rides and games specifically.
Okay. Thank you.
Ms. Cahoon?
One other question. How did we arrive at the minimum of 2 acres? Is that, I know I looked at, there's a lot of parcels that are bigger than 2 acres. Was there a magic number with 2 acres, or could it be 3 acres?
2 acres wasn't necessarily a magic number. At the planning board's discussion, we provided information on the average lot size and what the typical lot size is for the overlay district. The planning board looked at what is the minimum amount you could allow but still accommodate additional rides in terms of parking, actual spacing, adding something new onto the existing site. And with their discussion, they thought 2 acres was a reasonable minimum. But there was no sort of specific area calculation that created that threshold per ride. And again, they might be able to better explain their position than I could.
The reason I asked is you want it to be on larger tracks, and I didn't know if 3 acres would work better than 2 in order to accommodate the uses.
Well, we felt like 2 acres is a fairly sizable tract. And this would bring in most of the existing amusement sites that are now in place, and try to be able to allow this for someone who has, for example, putt-putt or bumper boats or something else. They could also maybe add in a kiddie ride as well.
Yes, Ms. Sadler?
Elizabeth, when you say 2 acres, are you saying 2 acres of uplands, or could it be an acre of wetlands and an acre of uplands? I mean, are we being specific that it is 2 acres of usable land?
No, we are not.
I think that's something we might want to consider, because should the height restriction be lifted, you've got a 1.1 fall radius there, and I would think that you would need 2 acres of good ground. I mean, I think we need to be more specific about the size of the property.
I'd be a lot more open to increasing the size requirement than having us get into wetlands delineation and trying to determine between uplands and.
Well, I'm just saying it would be very difficult, I think, to maintain what is proposed if you had 2 acres of not such good land. So you either make it a 5-acre tract or something larger, or you be very specific about what you have to work with. I don't guess it matters if the Ferris wheel would fall on the wetlands, but I'm not so sure I'm happy with that either.
Any other questions for Ms. Wyatt at this point? We can always call her back, too, if there are more questions. Ms. Teague, did you have
Just a
something to
note,
present?
the applicant's tract is 4 acres of developed area, not including the wetlands. So if you wanted to go up, that would certainly meet his needs still, up to 4 acres. And I did want to just point out a note on the lighting in answer to an earlier question. One option is to write in amusement rides as an exemption to your lighting ordinance. We don't necessarily have to come up with a lighting standard for amusement rides, and in fact, I think we all agree that's going to be very difficult, and we're a little concerned about that. So any guidance on that you could provide would be helpful.
All right, Mr. Tillett, do you have anything further you'd like to present to the board in support of your application?
No, I do not. I'd be happy to answer any more questions.
Okay. Does the board have any questions for Mr. Tillett?
Yeah, I think everything's been pretty well covered.
Commissioner Sadler?
I do. You know, Darnell, you and I have talked off and on for years about various things, and when I think you originally wanted to do something about the excess parking that you have there, and it certainly has been kind of a waste of the property because you haven't really needed it. You were talking about kiddie rides, and kiddie rides may mean something to one person and something different to another. I was a bit surprised when I realized that in your proposal was a Ferris wheel, because I do know that there is a height restriction in that overlay district. And I wonder if you have, and I think you have some pictures of some of the kiddie rides that you probably forgot to bring with you. They're in your truck. Because there are really some neat rides that you've are considering there if this ordinance goes through. What would the elimination of the Ferris wheel do to the kiddie rides? Just
Well, the thing with the Ferris wheels, and I know I said it's kiddie ride, and I didn't mean to mislead anyone, but for us, the Ferris wheel is like the icon of any carnival, and I don't consider, no, it's not a kiddie ride, but at the same time, it's a family ride, and I mean that's the ride that that when mom and dad are letting the kids ride, or even if you're at a park and there's all kinds of rides, that seems to be the one ride that mom and dad will go. You know, it's like the lovers ride and all that kind of thing. It's like people who don't dance will slow dance. Well, that's what you know. That's what that provides.
Thank you.
And so I just think that it goes with any carnival. Like I said, I did not mean to mislead anyone in saying that, because I just feel like the Ferris wheel is so tame. You know, the height part, I realize that's a problem, but it's just such a tame thing. It's not this hard spinning round thing. You know, it's just. It's like
is this the only ride that exceeds the 35-foot height limit?
Yeah, we plan to put in yes.
Right, and your proposal is that you actually operate from Memorial Day to Labor Day, and there will be no setting up of equipment before the Memorial Day. Well, there's plenty of time to set it up before the Memorial Day, and it is to be removed completely from the site after Labor Day. Is that correct?
Right. Come Labor Day weekend, he leaves, and you know, all the rides are gone, and it's like it was never there. There's no, you know, existing, if you want to call it, eyesore or half put up rides throughout the winter or anything like that. Everything. And there's nothing there, then you know how they can do that. And few days it's there,
no,
and it's
yeah, there's
it's
no
gone.
structure there to be there for a storm
Right.
event.
And then, yes, and we are having it, in case of a hurricane or threat of a hurricane, they are to be removed, and I know removed, but they are to leave. Not just be taken down on our property, but to actually leave the county, really.
Okay.
Or leave us. I can't tell them where to take them at that point, but.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Are there questions for Mr. Tillett? Commissioner Walters? No. Oh, okay. Anyone else? All right, thank you. All right, does anybody from the planning board wish to comment on this? Yes, yes, sir. Mr. Woodard? Yes, Mr. Edwards? Good morning.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor and Commissioners. The Planning Board had quite a lengthy discussion on this issue, as you can well imagine. Our major concerns were, even though this is in the Recreation Overlay District, was the height of the rides, lights, crowded facilities, proximity to residential areas, parking, and we addressed the height concern by resorting to the same restriction that we have on towers and then also in the hotel districts, and that anything over 35 feet, the setback is increased by 1.1 times the height of the structure. So that's where that came from. It's something that we already have in the ordinance and in other sections. We didn't just pick that two-acre restriction of the size out of the air. We looked at the parcel sizes, and part of the idea there was not only to prevent overcrowding, but to keep these rides away from residential areas. If you look at the overlay district and where the residential areas are located, if you take a 2-acre lot size, we'll keep these recreation facilities segregated as best we can from the residential area. So that was in our thinking, that we get that separation, because some of this overlay district backs right up, particularly on the causeway, backs right up to residential areas. Mm-hmm. So that was the idea there. We felt like that the recreation facilities would be a good addition to our beach environment and would give our vacationers more of a beach experience. As far as the lighting is concerned, we feel like that needs to be handled as a separate issue. None of you are old enough to remember the good old days when the Ferris wheel came to town on the third week in June, and all they had was a string of 60-watt lights around the Ferris wheel, and the good old country boys wanted it that way because it got nice and dark up on top. So,
Bob's telling his age.
in light of that experience, we might just keep our 10 candle power lighting restriction in place. I think we can work out the lighting issues. I don't think we want to violate the beach environment that we've created with our lighting environment, and I'm sure the planning board is going to have a lot of discussion on lighting issues on this also. But I'd be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
All right, any questions at this point from the board?
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. All right, does any other member of the public wish to comment on this proposed text amendment? If so, this is your opportunity to do so. All right, does the board wish to receive any further information about this before it begins its deliberations? Yes, Commissioner Cahoon.
Could I ask you a couple questions?
Yes, ma'am. Let me get on mic.
One question would be, is it a substantial change to change 2 acres to 3?
That will not change the character of the ordinance, so no.
Okay, and the other question I'm going to go ahead and ask, if we were to limit it to one ride above 35 feet, not to exceed 50, is that a substantial change?
No, that still does not change the character of the amendment.
Okay.
That would be permissible.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right. One thing I'll point out before y'all begin your deliberations is that I just noticed this as we've been discussing this. I would like to point out that for whichever one of the versions that you consider, The parentheses around the D should be removed because the way the current ordinance reads, this is a subpart to D1, so the D should really be non-parenthesed, if that's a word. And the same would go for the A and B. So whichever one gets adopted, if any, that revision should be made just for clarity's sake so that there's no confusion about where that would go. It should follow right under D1. Is that clear for everyone?
So this would be D1D.
That's correct.
Great.
All right. With that, we will conclude the public hearing, and the board may begin its deliberations on this matter.
Three acres, I hear some sense for making it 3 acres instead of 2 acres. Limiting to one ride over 35 feet, I think seems to make sense since really only a Ferris wheel is going to be over that 35-foot limit. To make this ordinance usable, I'd really like to see us, for now, exclude it from the lighting ordinance, because I think it's very unclear that you could do anything, you couldn't add a ride and still be in compliance with the lighting ordinance as this ordinance is written, I don't believe. So I'd like for us, maybe while the planning board is looking at it, write an exclusion into this ordinance that they don't, again, trying to make an amusement park ride look like it's not an amusement park ride, I think is an operation in futility. That was all my comments.
Just to let you know, there are 11 parcels greater than 3 acres, so it's not limiting it to one. So I went back and looked at the list that staff sent, just so we would have some idea of how many parcels were greater than 3 acres.
Is that 11 parcels currently that are enjoying a recreational use now?
I looked at the number of parcels. It doesn't list how the parcels are being used now. It lists the number of parcels in the recreational overlay, and there are 11 of them greater than 3 acres.
Okay.
All the way up to, the largest one, of course, is going to be Tanger Mall.
Right. Well, that was why I wish Elizabeth would come back up here. That's one of the reasons I kind of harped on established recreation uses, because number one, if that's where this ordinance is going, it eliminates restaurants in the overlay district. It eliminates shopping centers because they are not a recreational use. Now, Elizabeth, am I right or wrong?
You're correct. The way the ordinance is written is that these are accessory uses to established outdoor amusement uses.
Okay. So in saying that, I don't know how many parcels that would include, but it's very clear that if you are currently in the recreation business, go-kart, water sports, golf, whatever, that you could have a kiddie ride. Am I correct?
Yes. Yes, or a Ferris wheel.
Or a Ferris wheel, if you have the space.
Right.
Elizabeth, you and I had a little discussion yesterday on, just for clarification too, on the Windmill Point site. Can you tell me what you concluded that if this ordinance is passed, how it would or would not affect that site?
Yes, the Windmill Point is not an established land-based outdoor amusement use. It's an open event site. All the events that take place on Windmill Point are governed by the special events permit. So they would actually, that particular site would not be included in this ordinance.
Okay. Thank you.
Follow up to that, does that mean that should you want to have an outdoor carnival or amusement on that site, that could not occur?
No, it would just go through the special events
Special-
permit
okay.
process, like everything else on that site.
Okay.
Doesn't exclude those uses from this site, but it doesn't exclude like a Ferris wheel use from that site. It's just that that site is governed by a different set of parameters, and it would have to be organized under a special events permit, which is a temporary, short-term use of that site. in particular.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Question while you're up here, Elizabeth. The mayor said exempt it from the lighting standards. Is that going to do the same thing as what y'all are working on, which is a separate lighting standard?
Well, our conversation with the planning board, we felt like we needed to talk more about it. Originally, what we had proposed is exempting it from the lighting standard. And then we also are proposing another way is that lighting of Ferris wheels and other amusements should be reviewed and approved by the governing body as part of the conditional site plan amendment. That's another way of doing it, that on a case-by-case basis, you could determine what lighting might be appropriate in this situation. I do think we can come up with a standard, as Mr. Edwards said. It might be difficult to enforce. I know that Mr. Tillett has expressed concern to me about the ability for them to actually govern and monitor some of the choices they have on a Ferris wheel. You know, he's going out to a vendor to choose certain Ferris wheels, and most of them are with starbursts or flashing lights or already have a lighting scheme created, and sometimes it's hard to adjust that lighting scheme downward to meet some code, but it can be done. So we have a lot of work. If we're going to implement a lighting standard, we'll have a lot of work to do.
Thank you.
Yeah.
The only other comment that I want to make to the board is that I do have some heartburn about height restriction and lighting and the things that the planning board went over and over and over and discussed so thoroughly. One of the things that I do like about what Mr. Tillett's proposal was for his specific property, and perhaps if the board is going to pass something today, we may think about this. This is a temporary accessory use. It will not be on a site year-round. And I'm more inclined to give approval for something that is of a temporary nature. Even though he brings it back every year, it's not there to collect dust and rust all winter. It's not in the ordinance, but it's his particular request. Well, his particular. Darnell, can I ask?
Yes, ma'am.
Would you explain to the board again what it is your intent about when you're going to bring this on and when it's going to leave?
I mean, our intentions are to, like I said before, is to bring it in Memorial. You know, our season is pretty much Memorial Weekend to Labor Day weekend, and really, you know, the first week or two after Memorial Weekend isn't much. But anyway, so yes, it is. Matter of fact, we would open our go-karts Easter like we always do, and it would look just like it does right now. But then come Memorial Weekend, we'll be bringing in the rides, and then they'll be there till Labor Day weekend. And come Labor Day weekend, they're gone. And then that way you don't have, you know, the year-round sites. I don't want to call it an eyesore, but it's, you know what I'm saying, it's not half broken down rides and stuff like that.
Right.
It's
Okay.
It comes and it goes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
That I would ask the board to consider. If you're considering passing any part or any one of them, is to make this of a 6 months use, you know, of a temporary use on any site.
If I may, Mr. Mayor, to the extent the board wanted to consider doing that, you would need to add an additional condition into the language of what you would be adopting. I just want to point out that that would be the way of accomplishing that. It would simply be another requirement or limitation on the way that these uses are allowed.
Does that mean we'd have to have another, it doesn't restrict
Still does
it
not
enough?
change
Okay.
the character of the ordinance, but it would require that kind of substantive language being inserted.
I would be hesitant to do that, only because that kind of falls into the negotiation that he has with his contract with whomever he is going to work with for this equipment. And there are a lot of factors that come into that as far as when he can get it, where it's moving to another place. And I'd just rather not limit that. The likelihood of anybody having amusement rides of this type in January is pretty, it's pretty unlikely. They would be moving further south, I would assume, at that time of year. So I would just prefer not to put that in at this point in time.
With the board's permission, I'd like to go ahead and make a motion on this, I think. I don't see us, I think it limits itself naturally, and I don't see a Ferris wheel as being a blight in September as opposed to July.
How about January and February and March?
It's kind of immaterial. I really, we had one for a long time that was here in January, February, March, and it didn't seem to hurt the neighborhood. What I would look at is the planning board proposed ordinance. Excuse me, staff recommended and planning board recommended ordinance with some exceptions here. John, are you satisfied with the proof of compliance with all state and federal regulations will be furnished to the town upon request? Does that meet your concerns about federal and state?
I am. My comment on that was that I didn't know what that provision as written meant. I assumed that what it meant was that there was obviously some concerns about the safety of these types of activities, and that the planning board wanted to make sure that there would be that these would only be allowed if they could comply with those. But that's something that's imposed as a matter of law anyway. So I was thinking that what you may want would be the ability to ensure that there is compliance by making requests and being entitled to get proof provided upon request. At the same time, I want to point this out, I did have concerns about about town staff having some responsibility for ensuring compliance, inspecting, any of that. I don't know that that's really within the type of expertise that town staff has, and there are other state agencies and perhaps federal agencies that are responsible for doing that. But that was the intent of that sentence that I modified. And
I don't see the 2 acres or the 3 acres. Did I miss that?
Item 1 in the planning board, under D1. If you're under the planning board.
I think so.
No, go down, I think.
Staff, okay.
There it is.
Staff, go to planning board. There you go.
Thank you very much. I would suggest that we modify the minimum lot size to 3 acres on this one. And then I would also add an exclusion from the lighting ordinance for amusement rides. And phrase it similar to the exclusions from height limitations.
So you're not going to suggest limiting only one ride
Yes, ma'am. Excuse me. That was.
I was going to say, then you're looking at 10 Ferris wheel.
D1.
That would be somehow number 2.
And limited to 1 on D3, or that's D1, D3, I guess. Limited to 1 ride higher than 35 feet.
Okay, I'm going to second this for the sake of discussion and clarification.
Thank you.
Okay.
That way we can see up there.
Is this, now I'm reading the planning boards on mine. Is this the planning boards?
So
That's good. Leave it.
The one you're currently working with is the planning board text ordinance. This is the 3rd ordinance in your packet.
Right.
It should include some of the recommendations that came out of the planning board discussion. And if we've missed something, we can clarify it here. Under D1, as I understand it, you'd like that to be changed from 2 acres to 3 acres.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
there's agreement on that. And then also, I believe the motion called for under D2, amusement rides, including Ferris wheels, comma, limited to 1, comma, well, limited to 1 per site, comma,
No.
shall be permitted.
Wait a minute, change, it wouldn't be,
Okay.
it would be under D3. Of a height taller than
Okay.
35 feet shall be set back
Okay.
and limited to 1. That would be D3, not
Okay.
D2.
So, Michelle, that would be under D3, amusement rides of a height taller than 35 feet. This might sound a little bit awkward, comma, but limited to 1 per site. Shall be set back a minimum distance, et cetera?
I'd make it shall be limited to 1 and setback.
Okay. So amusement rides of a height taller than 35 feet shall be limited to 1 and shall be set back from a minimum distance. Okay. Going back up to D2, that actually does not change then, correct? And that says amusement rides, including Ferris wheels, shall be permitted in accordance with Town Code section, blah, 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 exclusions from height. And let's see, under number 4, it should say, proof of compliance with all other federal and state regulations shall be provided to the town upon request.
And then one more exclusion from the lighting ordinance, which would go to, I guess that would be a Part 4, with Part 4 becoming Part 5.
Yeah, I'll ask Kelly for the actual citations on the lighting ordinance, but we would be creating a new Part 4.
Can't see through the flower.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
And that we add Ferris wheels and amusements to the list of exemptions from the lighting ordinance, which I believe is the last paragraph in that lighting ordinance.
As a follow-up, Mayor, would you mind, instead of saying exempt from the lighting ordinance, shall be governed by a special lighting ordinance?
To be forthcoming.
You can't put forthcoming because that's the end. It shall be governed by a special lighting ordinance, not just exempt from the current lighting ordinance.
I mean, I'd prefer to leave it exempt, because I think if you're trying to do this coming up, you've got a huge amount. I wouldn't order a ride that I wasn't sure whether it was going to comply with whatever somebody was going to come up with.
I would hope what Elizabeth said earlier about it taking a long time is not true. I would hope that staff would get it to the planning board as expeditiously before we get into that.
Well, I think the
I just
issue,
don't want to make it totally exempt.
just to be clear, is we can come up with some guidelines on lighting. The real problem is whether the vendors can meet that guideline and are being able to create something that works for the existing vendors. In the preliminary research that we've been doing on Ferris wheels in particular, there aren't Ferris wheels out there that you can customize the lighting. You know, most of the vendors that are out there already have lighting rigged for their particular wheel.
Right.
So it makes it more difficult for the person who wants to bring in the Ferris wheel to actually find the lighting scheme if we have too much text amendments, too much wordsmithing, but it's going to be difficult for them to find a vendor that could meet an ordinance that we set up. going back to the second one in your packet, you will see that we came to a default on our staff recommendation, which is perhaps what they could do is bring in, as part of their site amendment, the different Ferris wheels that were available, for example, and ask for the board's input on what's the most appropriate lighting scheme. And then it could be your decision. It's going to be hard to create ordinances that will accommodate the vendors that are out there.
I don't think this board is qualified to do that. I mean, to sit there and debate it and then send it back. This could take months or years if everybody's debating what each person likes. And I just think you need to set a standard and move on and not bring it to the board how many ever times you're going to change it.
Well, how would you define it, if you didn't exclude it, how would you define it, I think, is the question. And given it broad enough room that it will, again, I just think it's kind of futile. I think you're tilting at windmills to try and make a Ferris wheel look like something else.
Well, I don't think it's so much that, Mayor. It's just that Nags Head has had a high standard on low lighting. And we've had some instances recently where businesses have wanted to have a higher candle power than what we feel is necessary. We don't like the elimination of the night sky. That's, people come down here and they can see the sky, and actually there's stars in the sky. So and that's why I kind of like this on a temporary basis, is because it's not out there in January all lit up. I know for a fact that we have chastised some of our businesses in Nags Head for having blinking open lights, an open sign. Well, the reason it's blinking is to draw more attention from the passerby. But it's also distracting, and we have an ordinance against it. So because we have amusement rides, now we're going to allow blinking or starburst or whatever. And I know that is an amusement ride, but I'm not willing to sacrifice the values that we've placed on outdoor lighting to get one Ferris wheel. So I'm throwing that out there. I think we need to be very careful with lighting, and I know the applicant cannot design a Ferris wheel that is, probably has one candle power or whatever. But I think we need to be, I will use a term that one of our commissioners have used very often, the camel's nose under the tent. So I want to do this. I want to do it right. I would love to see an amusement ride come to the Outer Banks in the summertime. But I don't want to sacrifice a lot of the values and ideals that we have here in town.
Is the concern the blinking? I mean, if we created the ordinance and eliminated blinking, would that meet the needs of the town? I'm not.
I'm just one. Yeah, and it would probably satisfy me personally and a lot of my neighbors, and probably a lot of the neighbors that are close to the overlay district. But I'm not sure how, the rest of the board feels about it.
Mr. Walters?
We're not going to be experts in amusement rides and what they can and cannot do. And I think there's probably a wide variety out there. And whatever contract he negotiates for now, he may not get the same equipment next year. So in an effort for everyone to move forward, I would support the exclusion at this point of time, but still allow the planning board to proceed. And I would suggest that maybe you take a look at Virginia Beach, whom they have, as we know, excluded digital reader boards. I believe they've excluded flashing lights, yet they still have a permanent amusement park with rides on the ocean front. They must deal with that somehow. But I don't know if it's exclusion or what, but I think there are other communities you can look to and also gather more information on what can and cannot be done with the rides and the lighting. Maybe you can turn off the blinking portion, or maybe you can dim or only turn on 50% of the lights, or, you know, I just don't know. But I think the planning board could move forward with looking further at that and still allow Mr. Tillett or anyone else that qualifies to move forward as well, you know, in the near term, because I do know that these type of things are booked many, many months in advance. So it's not a last-minute decision when you're talking about, you know, renting or leasing this type of equipment.
You're right, and it does take a while, and that's my concern. What if he, under this, if we pass it with no exclusion, then he goes forward with it, and then in January, I think the planning board's meeting December the 18th, is that correct? Okay. Do you, well, you know, I don't know when the planning board will come up with a decision, but to go forward with 3/4 of an ordinance and contract for equipment, when you come back in January and find out, you know what they just passed is not going to work. So where does it put you is what I'm saying. I mean, what kind of dilemma are you in?
Well, it puts you in the, I guess the most extreme possibility is you would have 3 months of bright lights. But if they come back with a recommendation, it could always become effective after the summer season.
Question for Elizabeth.
Just thinking.
Elizabeth, this would be a conditional use.
Correct.
As such, it would have to come back to us no matter what, before
Correct.
anything is approved.
Correct.
Okay, that would satisfy, because whatever is proposed would have to come back to us anyway.
Well, I'm sorry, Mr. Mayor, go ahead.
No, have y'all added an exclusion, somebody adding that exclusion from the lighting ordinance? Or getting the references?
I don't think we've gotten there yet. That's the additional Part 4 per the original motion, which included an exemption to the lighting ordinance. What number is that, Kelly? 48-328.
I guess my comment on the lighting is we had an amusement park in Nags Head for a long time, and I did not hear complaints from neighbors. We had an amusement park at the Windmill Point site summer before last, and we got wonderful public comment back from it. I don't see the community being up in arms over Ferris wheel lights.
Mayor, could I ask you to have maybe some comments from maybe some of the members of the planning board on this lighting issue? Maybe if somebody would like to help clarify my muddledness over the lighting. Bob, you or Marvin, you want to come on up here? Let me take a straw. Bob, the reason I ask that is I personally do not like to pass an ordinance half. And I feel that's what we're doing. We're giving the applicant, and anyone else that, you know, would be affected, we're giving them something with no lighting restriction. And then next month, we'll come back and, you know, give them a lighting restriction. It's not a complete picture for the applicant, in my opinion. Do you have any input that you want to?
I can only give you my personal opinion. We've got two other planning board members here that can give you their opinions. With the emphasis that we've had on lighting in Nags Head, I would like to fashion an amendment to this ordinance. I don't see any problem not going forward with the ordinance the way it's written this morning. And that's the reason the planning board brought it forward the way it did. But I feel like we need to address the lighting issue and keep it in the same context as our other lighting within Nags Head. I know it is a recreational use, and it needs to be considered as a recreational use in the recreation overlay district. But I still think we don't need just to open the door for all kinds of lighting in this area. So when we left the planning board, we thought the ordinance was complete as it went forward with the understanding that we would be addressing the lighting issue in the future. And the other members can give their opinion, but that's my opinion and my understanding of where we left the planning board.
Okay, thank you. I think it's great all of you are here because everybody has an opinion.
Good morning. I think everyone on the planning board was totally in favor of bringing amusements to the town. It's a very, very good addition to what the town has to offer. A few things just came up that kind of threw a monkey wrench into the general idea, and two of the predominant ones were the height and the lighting. And as a citizen, and based on my experience from living in South Nags Head, I'm concerned about the combination of both of those two things. On a clear night from my deck, if I look to the north, I can hardly see the Big Dipper. If I look to the south, I can see a lot in the night sky. It's just the accumulated lighting and its effect on the night sky of the mall and the Comfort Inn, and you get up in just the Whalebone area, the light just all tends to multiply. As I think of a Ferris wheel, 60 feet tall, and I think of the state fairs that I used to go to as a kid with the extreme amount of lighting that would be attached to all the rides, I envision a Ferris wheel as tall as the Comfort Inn with intense lighting attached to it. And I think that's a great detractor to the night sky situation. I don't think it would be a great technical challenge for vendors to adjust the lighting on Ferris wheels. And I don't think for the target audience, which is to be elementary age children and preschoolers, that we need a 60-foot tall Ferris wheel. So those were my considerations, and other members shared some or parts of those concerns. Thank you.
Thank you, Marvin.
My personal take on the lighting issue is that if we limit this to a 4-month span, we're putting up with, or not putting up, we're welcoming 250,000, visitors. And during the summer, we have a lot of distractions. And entertaining, now that we have a wonderful beach, obviously entertaining the families that come and visit we'd be remiss in not fulfilling that need. I think there's a void there now, and I think having a 60-foot Ferris wheel, is obviously an icon, to an amusement park. I think it would be good for Mr. Tillett, but I also think it would be good for our community. That said, lighting is a concern of mine too. I don't think anybody wants flashing lights and, something that's really gaudy. The fact that you're going to have starburst or whatever it is, you can dictate using a rheostat to adjust the volume of lighting and still accomplish what Mr. Tillett or anybody else would want to do. And I think that's why, being on the planning board, we discussed this at length and whether or not to include it as part of this ordinance change or actually have a specific control of the lighting issue is something that we wanted to discuss a little bit further before we, presented this. And I think that approach being said, we've got to be cognizant of the fact that how do we control it? How do we police it? Then we've got an issue that as a town we have to police, how to control that. But if we set the standard pretty specific, up front, then the vendor would have to accommodate that. And so we wouldn't, eliminate some of our management problems.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Dick. Thank you, Mayor, for allowing me to.
I have a suggestion.
Yes, ma'am.
Mayor, that we drop the exclusion of the lights, that particular section. However, that if we don't have something back to us by our February meeting, that we put this back on the agenda for consideration.
At the February meeting, or?
At the February meeting. That if we don't have something back from the planning board and staff, that we put that exclusion from the lighting back on the agenda. But give them time to work through it. And February is 2 meetings away.
And my interest here is, I think having it be uncertain really detracts from it actually happening, actually getting a Ferris wheel. But I think I can live with the February. If the planning board brings something back to us by February, we have the chance to vote it up, vote it down, and have a consensus that we go back and look at excluding at that point if we can't find something that is acceptable to everybody.
That's, Commissioner Walters, would that be all right with you?
Well, I think that really is going to limit his ability to get a Ferris wheel. That's just, I just know my little tiny piece of knowledge here from the carnival. Yeah, I mean, there really is a kind of a 6-month window, so could we move it to January? Is it possible to get that done, or does that not allow enough time?
Unfortunately, I think the wheels of government turn somewhat slower than that.
Slower than the Ferris wheel.
Now, the other take on this is looking at it, leave the exclusion in there, let the planning board look at what the right standard is there. I think it gives an opportunity to have it for this summer, which is, the timing is tight on getting something there for this summer. We're stuck with whatever comes out for the summer, but then we've got some control on it where, okay, you make it effective. If we come out with a due standard on amusement rides, you make it effective September 1st or Labor Day weekend.
I feel, Bob, that once you put something in place, once you put it out there, it's expected. And I think that's the incorrect way to give any business person a false sense of what they are going to get. What you see here this summer is what you can have forever. I disagree with that theory or that line of thinking personally. You need to, and I'd just like to ask the planning board, put you on spot. Do you think you can have something for mid-month January so he can have everything ready to go the day after the mid-month?
Darnell, did you have a comment?
Yes. Just since everybody's, I hear the word state fair and all being mentioned, what we're going to do is don't even come close to being anything like a state fair. As a matter of fact, you know, the way we'll start won't even be half the size of what we had at the amusement park. I mean, we're not, yes, the Ferris wheel's up there, but everything else is probably not any higher than, what other highest thing that he has is a 28-foot tall slide. Everything else is probably 20 foot or under. And it's just not quite, I think you're envisioning something that, like you said, a state fair, but it's really not like that. And the rides really, they do not have as much lighting as you think. And if you remember what was at the Windmill Point side a couple of years ago, now yes, those were big, high-flying, spinning. They did have a lot of that, but this is nothing like that. It's really not.
And while his plans are not anything like that, and I understand, because I've seen those pictures, that doesn't preclude anyone else from coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And because the standard that we set will be not only for this applicant, but anyone in that district now that has a recreation use. And there's probably a lot of folks out there in audience land that are listening to this discussion today. So even though Darnell personally wants a small Ferris wheel with no flashing lights, it is going to allow something to occur, or it could allow, that we may all be blamed irresponsible for passing something with no restrictions. Anyway, I hope mid-January could work for this applicant with an approved lighting standard.
Yeah, we've got a motion on the floor. We've got a second. I'm going to ask us to look at the motion as it stands with that exclusion. Vote it up, vote it down. We'll come, if that one doesn't pass, we'll come back with something else. But I think it gives them the certainty for this summer season that I don't think we've got the time to provide doing it otherwise. I think we've always got that opportunity to come back and add to the ordinance and eliminate this and replace it with a standard. But I think really to have something for the summertime, you've got to give them some certainty of what's going to be allowed and see what you've got. I'm not sure what it'll look like. I haven't seen the pictures. But I just think a Ferris wheel is going to look like a Ferris wheel. It's hard to disguise it very well.
Mayor, one more comment. I'm only going to state that since there's nothing in the ordinance that prohibits it from being a permanent fixture, then if you come back and do something, you're creating another nonconformity.
Yeah.
And my goal is not
right.
to create more nonconformities.
Yeah, that's why I had the temporary
But that's not in the language.
request, but it's not in there.
In any
Well,
draft, is it in there?
Let Bob just go ahead and vote.
Well, and I
vote
think
on
the
them.
temporary nature will, I mean, that's a natural feature to a certain degree. I don't think that the government has to come in and say you can only have it for 3 months. They've only got business for 3 months.
I get that.
He may not, but I'm envisioning somebody else coming in and putting in 2 or 3 kiddie rides and having it for as long as they are open.
Yeah,
And there's nothing in this ordinance that says that he can't. Well, anyway, as it stands now, as you're proposing, you want to call the question.
Call the question, vote
then
it up, vote it down.
I'm going to vote it down.
And we'll take another stab at it if this one
Okay,
doesn't pass.
right.
So everybody clear on the motion? It does have the exclusions. It's got 3 acres and only one higher than 35-foot ride. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign.
Aye. Or
The
no.
motion fails 2-2. Would somebody else care to make another motion?
I will. I'd like to make a motion that we adopt the ordinances on the screen with the exception of Part 4, where it exempts it from the lighting ordinance.
We have a motion on the floor.
Okay, I'm going to second that for discussion. Okay. Is that good?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. What does that do?
That does not exempt it from our lighting ordinance.
I know, and
it-
so,
I'm waiting for the planning board to come back, but you don't put that in an ordinance.
okay, but what you're saying is that, that what we're passing is subject to the ordinance, the lighting ordinance that we have in the overlay district.
That's correct.
Okay,
And if the
Okay.
planning board wants to bring back something that amends it, they can do so, knowing that we're under some time constraints.
okay. I second that. I did.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. I'm going to call a brief recess, y'all, briefer than the last one. We're going to come back to order, and our next item is new business, committee reports. Yeah. Committee report, ma'am?
Anybody else want to go
Will you
first?
lead off?
I'd be happy to do that. Actually, I only had one meeting. It was the tourism board meeting on the 15th of November. And, you know, I don't know how many of us realize the hardship that those of us that have friends and family and whatever down south of this bridge are having. But the chairman judge came before the board and told, and tourism is a big part of their livelihood as it is ours, and told us, you know, the hardships that they're really having. They are having a hard time. Anyway, we also reviewed our audit, which was in order. We got high praises, just like the town of Nags Head did with theirs. The most of the meeting, however, was taken up with discussion on the Windmill Point event site and what a short-term or 10-year plan would involve. It is the consensus of the board, the tourism board, to proceed with a 10-year master plan for that site. And that, I hope that squelches any rumor that it is going to be sold. The first thing that we're doing to make it better is to do some field work. And we have secured permission from the Dare County Board of Commissioners for an expenditure up to $120,000 for limited field grading and revegetation. And I have a detailed list of what that's going to do, if you all want to see it later. It's just, John DeLucia has been working with the board for quite some time, so there's a lot to be done, but it's not, well, for instance, we're not doing, this includes mass filling of the southwest area 18 inches. I mean, we're not going to go up, 9 feet. And it's just trying to level the site out, keeping the existing drive-in so that the site really can be utilized for both small and large events all spring, summer, and finishing with October the 19th, which will be the next year's Seafood Festival, right, Susie? Hopefully on October the 20th, more major improvements of the area can be. And we're hoping to, and I'll go to that next. We're in the discussion stages of securing an architectural firm to develop a master plan or a layout of the site for the short-term use. And that can include, because we're getting ready to send out, it's an RFP. Anyway. We want to incorporate on that site bathrooms and a stage area. We're also looking into the walk down the Sound shore and just infrastructure, electric infrastructure of a nature that you can still do so many different things on the site. We're not planning on putting up buildings. We may eventually, as the money is available, put up some type of pavilion. It might be open air to begin with. But that's what this firm that we are contemplating bidding out this work to, it can do. It can take the board's ideas and tell us best where to put these items for not only the short-term 10 years use, but eventually if there is some type of multi-use facility put there, you won't have to disseminate all the other things. So, good news. The steering committee yesterday sent to the full board for approval the grant request for our Phase 5 multi-use path, which would then take us to Villa Dunes Drive. We're getting there. So, and that the board should hopefully approve that, the full board, on December the 13th. So Elizabeth should know pretty soon on that. The a couple of things that came up, and I'll just tell you now, instead of me thinking about it. The chairman of the Tourism Board has asked me to kind of throw out to you all an idea about the use of the Harvey track as either let me get this correct, the possible use of the Harvey track as part of the Windmill Point event site to kind of tie them together. And I threw out there, I said, I know we've used CAMA money to improve the Harvey site. I don't know what restrictions CAMA money has on tying that site in with the Windmill Point. I know there's restriction on the septic tank. I think we can't rent it in conjunction with Windmill Point, but they want to kind of feel, particularly for ingress, egress, which, again, I know we share that driveway with another business, but it's something for us to think about as we roll along here, because the first thing you know, other events will be planned for that site. So we need to make a decision.
And I assume access is going to be part of that master plan? That seems to be one of the big bugaboos, I guess, for that site.
Yeah. Access for that site is difficult, and I'm excluding the Harvey track right now. But that's in the plan. That will be in the master plan. Where best to get in? Do you go around, make a semicircle, and come out? You know, what can you do to best utilize it? That being said, the expenditures for the site for improvements, which is the Tourism Board has a line item every year for that site for improvements down the road. And the first expense is going to be this amount up to $120,000 with John DeLucia and the people that he's working with. We need to decide, this board needs to decide, are we in for a penny or we're in for a pound? In other words, we need to make it clear so there are not false expectations with the new tourism board, with new board members here as they come on, of what our obligation is. And we looked at the MOU with the town and the tourism board the other day. It's pretty clear what we do for maintenance over there. That fund, that enterprise fund, will soon be depleted because we no longer have a tenant. Is that right, Cliff?
Exactly right.
So once that money's gone, you know, then I think we probably have to split that. This again can be discussed. Split that proportionately as our share of ownership is. But things such as this $120,000, and I think that the Adair County Board of Commissioners would also like to know, what obligation is Nags Head willing to do, and if none, there needs to be in black and white. You know, we bought the property empty, and that's it. And any improvements that you all make, you know, you get back if you ever sell it, or whatever. Or we'll do our 28%. Well, if that's what we need to do, then that's what we need to do. But there needs to be some clarification in the future about what we commit Nags Head to do. And the tourism board has not asked me to ask you for 28% of the 120. I will tell you that. But they would kind of like,
the two lots combined.
You know, to know, are we getting involved in improvements?
I guess, so we're saying that the MOU did not speak to capital improvements. I would think that whatever we consent, it would have to be done by consensus. I mean, I would not see that the majority partner could say, we're going to do this and here's your share. I think there has to be consensus between the two parties.
Well, I think as the MOU reads that the majority partner can pretty much do what they want, but they cannot put you in debt for it. They can just kind of, because they have more votes on the, yeah. So what I'm saying is the tourism board could go put up a staging area and a boardwalk at the cost of $1 million. I mean, they could do it without our permission. But they couldn't come in and say, you owe us $280,000. And it's certainly not adversarial. It's just that what can the tourism board, what can the county commissioners expect from the town as the tourism board decides to put more and more improvements on the site? We need to either say, you know, guys, do what you will to improve it because it's improving our community, but it's not in our budget. And should the site ever be sold, there can be some kind of understanding that, you know, we only get our proportionate share of the land and its appreciation, or get paid back what we spent with interest. You know, whatever we feel is fair. I mean, but it just needs to be out in black and white in the near future before we get into spending what is going to be budgeted each year on the tourism board.
I think it's a great policy discussion for our retreat.
Perfect.
Good suggestion. Mr. Manager, will you add that to our retreat agenda?
But do be thinking about, and we can do this too at the retreat, the Harvey site.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. That is all of my, that's all of that.
Two things briefly. The CRC met in November. We did do an emergency variance granting DOT, and they're installing the sandbags now along Highway 12 at Rodanthe. They got an exemption to how sandbags, the height, depth, and width of them. They're much bigger bags. Also at that meeting, which was of interest to me, is there was a presentation on groundwater, and the issues that we have reminded me of what we've dealt with this season in Nags Head. A gentleman, Mr. Lilly, did a historical perspective of all of eastern North Carolina, and it might be a nice presentation at some point to have in Nags Head, maybe with the planning department and planning board as we talk about fill and those issues that are coming forward. It was what to do with groundwater, and it was pretty interesting discussion.
And Mr. Lilly is
He's a gentleman, he's a retired gentleman from Washington County. He's worked with the state, and he worked with, oh gosh, one of the offices like land management, soil and water conservation. I think that's what he did, but I know you can get the information from Angela Willis at Coastal Management, but this just reminded me of a lot of what we're going through and how to deal with stormwater and groundwater. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Mr. Walters.
Nothing to report.
Next item is discussion of new Dare County C&D tipping fee policy. Mr. Ogden.
Thank you. The county manager notified myself as well as the town manager of Kill Devil Hills a week or 10 days ago about a direction that he received from his Board of Commissioners, and that was to begin the implementation of charging the town and Kill Devil Hills the tip and fee for materials that we bring to the C&D landfill. What this means is that anything that a citizen drops off in our debris yard on 8th Street, or anything that we pick up as part of our curbside bulk collection program, we're gonna have to start paying tip and fee for. Currently, the tip and fee per ton is, I think, about $65 or $67. We've gone back and estimated the historical cost, what this would be on average, and it's anywhere from, it would be between $25,000 and $35,000. This fee will start January 1st, so to get us through the remainder of this current fiscal year, which we have not budgeted for, would be somewhere between $25,000 and $35,000 if we take the low and the high history. So we're looking at $50,000 to $70,000 per year. What's unique about Kill Devil Hill, most unique about Nags Head than any of the other municipalities or the county, is that we're the only one that offers that bulk side, curbside collection. Kill Devil Hill is used to, they no longer offer that program, but they do have a collection site where folks can bring the material to them. The county has there's many things I think that we can do to maybe offset some of this cost depending on the direction the board would choose to go. Right now, anybody, any resident can carry 50 pounds per trip to the county.
500.
Excuse me, 500 pounds per trip, thank you, big difference, to the county landfill in Buxton or on the way to Stumpy Point, and it's free, it's no charge, and those trips are limitless. So theoretically, technically, you could take 4 500-pound trips in one day and not be charged for that. The obvious question is, well, what's the difference if it travels in my personal truck or if it travels in the town truck? Because the town offers this program, it's rolled into our tax rate, it's a service that we provide. The way that it's explained to me is that if we could figure out a way at our debris yard to collect no more than 500 pounds per trip, then everybody's on that same playing field. That's the purpose of putting this policy in effect now, is to make everybody on that same playing field. That's one thing that we could do. You know, I don't know how practical it is for us to go out and purchase scales to put at our debris yard. It still doesn't give us the ability to find out whether or not we're picking up less than 500 pounds on the curbside, which I think we can say we are, but there's no way to ensure that. So there are other ways that we could limit this by only accepting certain things at our debris yard. I think we should continue to collect brush and yard debris because we mulch that and we use that. But we could maybe limit what we take, what we accept to try and reduce some of the costs. But it is going to be a big adjustment if you know, if the easiest thing to do is to pay the fee and keep on status quo, provide the service, incorporate it into our general expenditures. If we don't do that, it is going to be a big adjustment to our citizens and our property owners, in that this is a service above and beyond that they have received for as long as probably any of us can remember. And to change that now is going to take some reconditioning. We do have fear that folks aren't going to take their material to Stumpy Point. They may find the closest unwatched commercial dumpster to throw it in. They might dump it on, you know, there may be a lot more debris on the 1243 because it's easy to put it there and it's difficult for us to find its owner. So I'm looking for direction on where to go from here. If we want to make any changes, it's not something I think we can decide today. To be effective January 1st, we are changing how we operate, but it's for your discussion.
The trigger, I'm sorry, ma'am. Go ahead.
Suggestion? Since I'm still confused as to what the difference is of 10 trips at 500 pounds by an individual versus one trip at 5,000 pounds, I'd like to ask, since we meet, I guess, January 2nd?
Actually, 16th. There's one meeting in January, and that'll be the 16th.
Okay. I'd like to direct the manager, if possible, to go back and get with the county manager and say, look, it's hard to institute things in the middle of a budget year, and let's see if we can work it out some way and have him bring an answer back before we sit here and try to resolve this today. In the meantime, we would have an answer back to be better prepared for our January 16th meeting. I don't think those 2 weeks are going to kill us. But in comment to the manager, I saw people dumping mattresses in a dumpster in Nags Head already. So people are going to find the easiest way to dispose of stuff that they can, and that was within the past week that they were dumping. So, but I'd like to see if the manager could get with the manager of Kill Devil Hills and the county and see, have a thorough face-to-face discussion, not sit here and do email, which is impersonal at best, but to sit down and talk as communities that work with one another.
Now, was the trigger to this the fact that we didn't have a declaration for the storm and debris from there was not reimbursed? Is
That's could very well be the debris that we're picking up as a result of Hurricane Sandy. We're all paying for that. The county, the municipalities, right now we don't have a declaration, and so anything that, you know, we're not getting reimbursed for that. So the county's cost of cleaning up Hatteras Island and other areas of unincorporated Dare County is coming at their expense. So if we're bringing an additional tonnage, then, that's revenue lost that they're trying to account for.
But I agree completely with Commissioner Cahoon. Doing this in the middle of a fiscal year it would be much better if it was at the end of a fiscal year, and if we can work for at least a delay and some time to discuss, I think that does seem very reasonable.
In saying that, I hope Cliff will ask Bobby if indeed it was as the mayor said, all of the debris that's coming up from Hatteras and everything that we took over there, as well as up the road. Because if that is it, maybe there is some way of reimbursing the county for storm debris, but not the regular household.
Good point.
As a because I have thought about this, and once you become accustomed to a service, and Nags Head has a lot of services that we do for us, the citizens, it's difficult, as we've already found out about the summertime pickup. It's difficult to cut something, and it takes years for the word to get around. So I think we're going to pay no matter what, but how much is out there. I'll be interested to see what they say.
And I'll be honest with you, commercials are already used to doing that because we don't pick up for commercial sites. So we're already used to having to pay and haul that to Stumpy Point or rent a bin or whatever to take it over. So it's a residential issue, pretty much, not a commercial issue.
And you're correct, they will find a dumpster to put it in, because
That's
I know it's problematic in KDH in that people have installed lights and cameras just to watch their dumpster to try to catch people that are putting stuff in it, and
Been there and done that.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah.
Oh, I saw a guy dumping in the Bonnet Street
Yeah.
access dumpster kind of late at night.
Can you identify the person? Kevin's listening.
Okay.
I couldn't, I'm sorry.
That's a great idea, Renee.
Cliff, is that clear enough?
Yes,
Direction?
thank you.
Items referred to in presentations from the town attorney.
Mr. Mayor, I have nothing to present at this time, but I would like to request a closed session in order for the board to confer with the board's attorney and protect the attorney-client privilege at the appropriate time.
Okay. And this might be the appropriate time. I think we do need some counsel on one of the items that's coming up, and that is particularly the George and Patricia Moore request. And I think we should take this time to go into closed session and get advice from the council on what the effect would be of granting or not granting that request. Is that?
Do I need to do that
Okay,
now?
I think we need to do it now before we discuss it in open session. And can you give us the
Yes, sir.
appropriate?
If someone would make a motion to enter closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11A3 in order to consult with the board's attorney and protect the attorney-client privilege.
So moved.
Second.
Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, like sign. We're going to have a brief closed session.
Mouse. Use a mouse.
We're going to come back into open session. The next item on our agenda is items referred to in presentation. Excuse me. I'll ask Mr. Lighty to report out from closed session.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The board did confer with the board attorney in order to preserve the attorney-client privilege, but no action was taken.
The next item on our agenda is items referred to in presentations from the town manager, update on the stormwater drainage projects.
I'm going to give you an update on some of the conversation and meetings that we've had with DOT, and then ask Ralph to come up and discuss the progress on the Vista Colony project. We were scheduled to meet about a month ago with DOT, but of course Hurricane Sandy kind of put a change in the DOT's work schedule. But we have since met, and we have some progress and some things on the calendar. Our staff went through and removed some of the vegetation in the right-of-way swell adjacent to the North Ridge property along US 158 in preparation for DOT to come in and clean out and regrade that swell to try and both capture the runoff from the street, and also that's going to help with some of the drainage in the back of that neighborhood. At the same time, they've committed to scraping and regrading as much as they can a swell directly across the street, just south of Bark Street. During some of the heavy rains, we've had water that encroached onto one of the northbound lanes along 158, so they're going to get some improvements there. They're also going to make an attempt as best they can to try and sheet some of the water off of 12 around Jockey's Ridge on the Beach Road. It's very little benefit to doing that, but it will help some. Perhaps one of the things we're hoping will be more success is that they've been down and they've looked. Have before at the 8,000, between the 8,000 and 9,000 block on 1243 that we've had such a long-standing problem with water there, to basically do the same thing as regrade, scrape off the shoulder there in hopes that that water will collect more and form whatever swell they can in that little bit of area. Yes, ma'am.
Only in that one block?
No, they'll do this all the way down, but that is one of the main problem areas where water stands so long in the road. We got the bids in Monday for the multi-use path. As part of that project, DOT is committed to, prior to Christmas, right sizing the 2 culverts that go under Wood Hill and Villa Dunes. As part of the multi-use path project. During all the rain that we had during Burrell in May, we had the undersized swell and culverts there became evident with the water that backed up in the professional offices on Wood Hill, as well as the Pirates Quay. This will help some of that. We're waiting on review for DOT. We're ready to go ahead and repipe the ditch that runs between Dirty Dicks and Nags Head Realty. DOT recognizes that there is a compromise in the pipe that goes under the bypass to the north, old Nags Head Pond subdivision. That's a pretty big job for them to do, and they're hoping that they can re-sleeve that. So they are aware and moving towards that. And then also the phase 2 of the Vista Colony Nags Head project that they're getting their hydrogeological folks to look at, and that is granting us the approval to put the culvert under Barnes Street along 158 so that we can go ahead and run the water that now terminates at Barnes and Meekins on out to the bypass, versus if that doesn't work, then we'll go back to sending it down Blue Jay. That's the discussion that we've had with DOT. We're still waiting in the old Nags Head Pond to get some response back from DWQ as to what we might be able to do for some improvements there. Tonight, David Ryan and Ralph Burrell and I will meet with some property owners in Northridge who have trying to come up with a private-public partnership whereby we might be able to help one another with some stormwater problems. The private-public partnership that was presented to you by some homeowners along Memorial, that's going out to bid this week, so that's moving forward. And I'll go ahead and ask Ralph to come up and address Vista Colony.
In Vista Colony and back in that stormwater project, the wells were drilled and put in last week. The contractor will be in possibly the end of this week and next week to go ahead and to put the well heads and start piping them up. So that's where they are. We got a few issues to work through with the electrician to wiring them up. They came back with another recommendation that would basically be better to how to wire them and getting longevity out of the electrical service that's put there. But that's where that project is right now.
Once those pumps are turned on and the groundwater is lower, then we can go ahead and put the culverts in the ditches there and fix those ditches.
Questions for Mr. Ogden?
Are you going to continue to update us with cost?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. I will. But for this point, it's more of an update than anything because I'm not before you with any increased expenditures.
I do. Cliff, are you satisfied with the cooperation from DOT?
I would, obviously, if Sandy hadn't occurred, I would have hoped we'd be much further along than we are now. Now that some time has passed from Sandy and they've been able to get their priorities back, you know, to look at other projects, then we're gonna stay on them pretty hard, because this is, I don't want to go through another year like we did, and anything that we can do to make improvements, I'm gonna do. I'm gonna stay on them.
Well, I just hate to see, I know a lot of their work is also in conjunction with our work. I would just hate to see a lot of this still ongoing this coming summer,
Yes, ma'am.
but I guess it'll occur.
We hope to have the multi-use path complete by March. I mean, that's my optimistic completion date is March 1st, and so that would...
March 15th.
March 15th.
March 15th, and it was that's the way it was bid, that's the way it's going to be presented in the contract. I have a meeting tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock with DOT out at Villa Dunes to show them exactly what they need to do and what they need to lower.
So the timing of that gets a lot of the work done in conjunction with the multi-use path, so that helps.
Okay.
Any other questions for the manager on stormwater? It's been a hot topic this year.
Okay, I wanted to show the board the graphs on the, give you an update on the amount of sand, the cumulative loss on the, and the survey, the November survey that was conducted by CSE. I'll give you I'll try and explain these graphs, but I'll give you the nutshell. From the completion of when the project was completed, and CSE did their confirmed sand placement in November of 11 until June 2012, we actually gained 527,000 cubic yards of sand, greatly due to summer accretion. From June until the November survey, we had a net loss, cumulative loss of 416,063 cubic yards, and that goes to the 19 feet, the FEMA limit, which our maintenance and monitoring plan says, and FEMA standard is, if anything goes beyond 19 feet, it's out of the system. We're not paying to put it back, but anything that you can show loss from that 19 feet, then we'll replace it. So that's what, if the state has asked FEMA for a 21-day extension on making a declaration. So I believe the deadline for making if we get a federally declared declaration, it'll be between now and December 21st. There's a $13 million threshold that has to be reached. That 400,000 cubic yards, it's going to be tough to meet that threshold. From what I understand from North Carolina Emergency Management, that FEMA doesn't look favorably on reimbursements as a total if more than half of the reimbursement is due to sand loss. So we're kind of in a wait and see. We don't have a federal declaration yet. If we get one, we'll have it by the 21st. And what we would be reimbursed for is that 416,000 cubic yards. There are 4 graphs. The graph A, the one before you now, will show, if you're looking at this graph from left to right, it shows the dune, or if left to right would also be west to east, shows where the sand was placed up on the top of the berm, the constructed berm, the 6 feet, will show you the changes there. Can you zoom in on that? The tan color is what Great Lakes placed. The brown color is what CSC confirmed. The green is the June post-project, and the blue is the one-year one-year survey. So you can see that we've had quite a bit of sand that's built up on the visible beach at the dune line. The difference between what they placed and what we confirmed is it's part of the equilibration. When Great Lakes puts the majority of it on the beach, because the bulldozers obviously can't work but in so much depth of water, so it catches up at the toe of the fill. You'll see out there at the top of the toe of the fill, the 12 feet, excuse me, it equals out. The other thing I wanted to point out here is that the next three graphs will show you at the particular depths where the change in volume is by reach. I know that's an important thing based on how each one of the reaches did. But if you look at the negative 19 feet, which is kind of the sandbox that Dr. Khanna describes, you'll see that the summer accretion in the green, and then post-storm, post-nor'easters, 1 year later, the 416,000 cubic yard loss, which amounts to about a 10% loss, which I think we've said it before that the project did its job. It has shown an increase of dune protection. You know, we'd like to be able to claim that 500,000 feet that we got through, or excuse me, 500,000 cubic yards and be making 1 million cubic yard loss to FEMA, but it just doesn't work that way. If we could go to graph B, and this will show you by reach. And this first one, I believe, goes to the 2 foot, which is the mean low water, right? The average where the low water is, the wet sand beach. And this will show you the same graph by each reach, reach 1, 2, 3, and 4. You'll see the most change, I think, probably in reaches 2, or excuse me, reach 1. Remember, reach 2 and 3 were by far the largest combined reaches. So that just kind of gives you, again, look at this from west to east, as we're going from the dune on the left-hand side on out to the depth, the deeper water on the right-hand side. This is mean low water. Graph C will show us 12 feet, I think. Is that right?
So this is mean low water to 12 feet?
No, yes. This goes to 12 foot.
But it's not mean low water to 12 foot, it's from the dune to 12
Correct.
foot. Okay.
Total accumulative loss, volume changes.
Huh.
And then again, the 19 feet, the one that FEMA will probably look at is graph D. And again, that's all an accumulative amount. So again, the project fared well. We've had nor'easters, we've had 2 hurricanes. The project, again, has done well. It was recognized at the North Carolina Beach and Inlet Waterways meeting. It's being picked up by a lot of the towns, and I've gone into the consulting business with other town managers, and how did you do this, and how did you do this without federal or state funding, and right down to the financing. So that's the nutshell.
I mean, the real benefit is in prevention of damage before nourishment. We had the Comfort Inn, the condominiums that are just south of there. There were a number of big properties right on the edge, millions and millions of dollars worth of property. So, and we successfully protected those so far.
Cliff, I think we also, in this last storm, didn't we get a lot of accumulation on the dunes themselves?
Very much, which what the graphs will show and point out is that the increase was in the berm.
Because I think a lot of people are still building out, digging out behind the dune. I guess it's better to have that problem than having ocean overwash running into your ground floor.
Better to know where your steps are and then to not know where they are.
Yeah, or to not have them.
Exactly. Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Okay. The only other thing I wanted to bring up to the board is I've had 2 requests come forward, and I wanted to put these before you, not for your action, but for you to consider, and maybe we can take action at the January meeting, and that's be some changes to the traffic control map. If you'll put those. They both come from property owners associations. The first one is a request to put no parking signs up. This is just adjacent to Seven Sisters. You can see where the property owners association has asked to put those. There's a large amount of stand by.
How many parking signs would be there? 2?
2. Yes. Two parking signs right where we're looking. But this is directly, I think you all know where this is. I wanted you to be able to see this, and from this point forward, I'd like to be able to present these requests in this way so that you'll have time to be able to, instead of just getting this and making action, you'll have some time to consider it. And so this is the first one. The second one is, was brought to us by the Northridge Property Owners Association. This is the intersection of Lookout and Windjammer. They are requesting that we make that intersection a four-way stop sign. Right now, presently, there are stop signs as you're traveling on Windjammer. There are none for Lookout. So they're requesting that we make that a four-way. So again, I put this before you to give you time to make your deliberate on whether or not you think this is something that needs to be done.
And which one's the main road there?
Windjammer's the one that you enter into when you come into Northridge. You're coming in on Windjammer.
So there's stop signs on Windjammer, but not Lookout?
Correct.
Seems opposite.
Is that backwards?
Okay.
Just as it shows there, there's stop signs on Lookout, but not on Windjammer.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
I had that backwards. Thank you, Chief. That's all I have.
Wait, Cliff, did both of these come from the associations
Yes, ma'am.
themselves?
Yes, ma'am. And we'll have we're getting this one I have officially in writing. The other one, the chief is working with the property owners. They've made the request to him, but he's asked him to put it in writing and formalize it.
And the other one was on Highway 12, is that right?
Right.
Okay, so this is just for...
That's just for
This
information.
is information,
Right.
and then we'll...
No action.
Take an action on it at the next meeting. Okay. The next item on our agenda was consideration of a request from George and Patricia Moore regarding their South Nags Head properties. We actually went into closed session to get advice from council on this request, and board consensus is to take no action at this time. We do have some pending litigation that this could affect. We also have some pending legislation that talks about the town's ability to address properties that are actually on the beach. So there are two pieces there that we just feel like we need some more time to take a look at this. And that was consensus. It may very well come back up if one of those things changes. Board of Commissioners agenda. Commissioner Kuhn?
Yes. The first one is, it shouldn't be just discussing the pumping of water by those. The question's for the attorney. John, when people are working under valid building permits, say construction of a new home, and they're doing things that are illegal, such as running pipes onto their neighbor's property to flood it and so forth, do we have any recourse, since they're working under a building permit, to stop those actions?
Not usually. Your enforcement is designed to ensure compliance with the permit on the site that's been permitted. And off-site activity is generally not something you can enforce or deal with through enforcement of the permit. There may be other remedies available, particularly to the landowner, to deal with that, such as a trespass or some other type of claim that they may have. There may be a criminal trespass as well. But generally speaking, the town's enforcement is limited to ensuring compliance with the activities allowed by the permit on the permitted site.
So if they show, for an example, putting in a pool, and they show where they're going to be pumping the water from the hole where they're going to put the pool, and they deviate from that, we don't have any.
That might be different. That might be different, because then there would, I think that hypothetical would be a situation where someone is not in compliance with their permit on that site itself. That might be different. You might be able to deal with that.
And also, where they put their trash dumpster, if we know it's not on their property, that's under their permit as well.
I don't know that
They've got to have a trash bin according to the permit.
I'm not sure if the permit specifies the location, though. If the permit specified the location of the receptacle and they did not comply with that, then yes. But I don't know that the permit requires them to identify where that receptacle
Except
will be
on the
located.
property that they're building.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know, because I can see a situation where they might be allowed to, they might have an agreement with an adjoining landowner to place that there as if it was a staging area.
I'm just starting to see an awful lot of open building permits where they're really egregious violators of the adjoining properties. And what's happening is the citizens are saying, doesn't the town of Nags Head do anything about people committing illegal acts under an open building permit?
Yeah, and it's not so much, again, if, going back to your hypothetical of a pool being constructed and then the water being drained off of the pool, the draining of that water onto an adjoining property, not the property that's being repaired, and something that they don't have a permit to do. If there's a regulation that prevents them from draining that water that way onto another property, and I don't know if there is an ordinance that addresses that. If there was, then that might be something that the town can address. But otherwise, what you have is potentially a criminal action, a criminal trespass, but certainly a civil trespass, something that the adjoining landowner would have the right to either pursue a criminal remedy for or a civil remedy against the offender, the contractor, or whoever it is that's draining that water.
And the other one that kind of along those lines, for people that install illegal drainage mechanisms, do we have any remedy with that, or is that a private property matter as well?
Give me an example of
running illegal drainage pipes that were put in after your building permit was issued.
What are you draining?
Your property.
People, excuse me, for an example, if it's okay, downspouts from the roof, they may run to the corner of their property.
Actually, I'm referring more to building sites that are built that are really high, and they run pipes onto the lower adjoining properties that are physically pipes run into.
If it's not in compliance with their site plan, then that might be a violation. I don't know, off the top of my head, I don't know whether there's any other ordinance that would prohibit someone from placing those kinds of drainage mechanisms on their property. I don't know if that's something that's limited to being allowed with the site plan once approved or not. We could take a look at that. But again, and I know we've had that issue before in various places where someone drains water off their property, or, for example, they construct their property in such a way that it causes water to shed onto other people's property. That is a nuisance and/or a trespass, even when it's done in compliance with a building permit or a site plan. If I live next to you and I build my lot up so high that now all the water sheds off onto your property, even though I build in compliance with what the town's authorized me to do, you can still sue me for a trespass or for creating a nuisance.
All right, thank you. That answered that question. Okay. And then the next thing I had was, we talked a little bit about South Nags Head drainage, but part of the problem, Cliff, is you're talking with DOT, and Ralph, you've done a good job. I know Ms. Miller is here, and you've tried to help her, and I know you've helped Mr. Mann in some cases, but this is a DOT right-of-way. Now, Michelle, I had some pictures, please. But part of the problem that exists in South Nags Head, and I don't know how you resolve it, is when DOT resurfaced that road, they raised the grade up to the point where you see those little driveway cuts. That actually, they didn't do that voluntarily. They did that after there's so many complaints because the drop-off from the road was so bad that cars were hitting. And so they actually came into almost every driveway down in South Nags Head and put those little connectors things so that people could turn in. But what that does is, by the elevation of the road, it funnels all that storm water both to the east side and the west side of the... That's my driveway. This is an example of what we had most of the summer, and this was actually this fall after, a few weeks after the hurricane went by. But
it's like this after a moderate rain. Excuse me for being out of order.
Sorry. Yeah, but it's that way all down. And we've got a bike path down there that nobody could ride this summer because for weeks on end it stayed flooded. And we need to really work with DOT and encourage them somehow to resolve this issue because they've created a lot of this. I know development has created, but the way they structured the road, it all drains off over the bike path into people's yards, and in some cases in the 8,000 block of Old Orient Road, the water now floods the houses on a heavy rain. It physically goes into the houses. So we've got to do something, working with DOT, to resolve this issue. And it's got to be, they got to do a little bit more than think about a swale, whether it's French drains.
Right.
Or what they need to do, but that road was flooded just about all summer long.
It was.
And especially down around 18 where the curve is, that lane of traffic was shut almost all summer long. Or not shut, but people had to go through it. It was pretty deep, and our trash cans floated in it all summer long. So people had to go around. It really does create a safety hazard. So as you're talking to DOT, it really needs to be much more emphatic, because they really did create the problem by raising the road 4 or 5 inches. That's a lot in drainage terms.
Understood.
I mean, DOT's goal is to get the water off the road, and raising that road, it wouldn't seem like it would create more water runoff. It would just run off faster, it would seem, but...
What it did was, instead of being on a more level plane where it didn't flood everything out, it now runs to the lowest spot because they created a much artificially higher spot. Because before, sometimes on the west side, no, excuse me, the east side up at Mount Comfort Inn and different places, the water flowed over into the sand and it absorbed it more naturally. Now it flows to the west side where your elevation is lower automatically, and it just sits because it doesn't drain the same way.
So it changed the drainage pattern from going to the east to going to the west?
Yeah, and in some cases it changed it from going to the west to the east, but and of course the ditch, as we all know, it stays pretty full of crud. So it doesn't drain like it as much as it did because it stays full of junk, because the water, stuff just sits on top of that ditch all the time. I mean, it's got such a surface muck on it and green gunk that but I think we need to do a better job of staying in constant communication with DOT to get it done.
Yes, ma'am.
And get that, because this flooding now has been going on. They finished that road in 2004. And this is 8 years later, and the flooding's just getting worse as we have heavier rains. Well, as we have heavier rains and higher groundwater. But it's been an ongoing problem. The people have been contacting DOT and getting no response back whatsoever. And I know DOT's plate's full and they don't have as much money as they used to, but they created part of their own problem down here. And it needs to, we as a board need to ask DOT to fix that problem, because it is causing property issues, it's causing right-of-way issues. I'd like to see us, as a board, ask DOT to get it done.
But what's the solution?
I think part of the solution, number one, is not just regrading their swales, but putting in some other mechanisms that they've got at their disposal, such as French drains. They've got a fair amount of right-of-way, especially on the west side, that they could come in and put some drainage solutions in.
But you still got to have room for your French drain to work. If it's groundwater, if it's a groundwater issue, that French drain is going to have a problem too.
It's not groundwater. A lot of it's just runoff where the road is higher and it creates a dam. And they've pumped the water. The road has caused it to pool in areas that it would not normally pool in because they've got the dam in the middle.
It appears the swales no longer exist.
They don't exist.
So it seems like if
There
that's
are
part
no
of the
swales
plan,
down
that
there.
would
There are no swales down there.
assist
And there are areas where French drains probably could work. And like I say, Ralph's done a good job in some areas down near some of our beach accesses of digging some area out. And it allows the place for water to go until it filtrates down.
Resolution by the board, maybe we can have one drafted for the next meeting, is that?
I would think that would be very helpful.
Okay.
And in the meantime, I would hope that y'all are meeting with DOT, that this is on the agenda with your meeting with DOT. Not just the north part of town, but the south part of town.
Yes, ma'am.
No, I just want to thank the taping guys once again. They've been here for us for a long time, and we'll miss them. Do you have something about the salary adjustment on your agenda?
What we've done with seasonal adjustments, it's the same thing that we did last year. Cliff has probably got better details on that, but what we've done is given a gift card, essentially.
$100 gift card. Last year, you granted the $100 gift card from State Employees Credit Union, which put more money in their pocket and took less out of ours.
Well, I like that idea better.
Sounds win-win, doesn't it?
It is. That's all I have.
Mr. Walters? I've got two things. One is sand fence really works if you put it out there. I got mine out right after Sandy, and we've probably accumulated 3 to 4 feet of sand behind the sand fence. Now, it did blow northeast for 2 weeks, but so it was a little bit unusual, but there's a lot of sand to be captured blown up and down the beach just by using sand fence. The second item I had was a small certificate for Mr. Boyer. Bob, we would like to thank you very much. Let me read this certificate of appreciation, if I may. The Nags Head Board of Commissioners has caused to be entered this date into the official record of the town of Nags Head, North Carolina, a certificate honoring Bob Boyer. This certificate of appreciation is presented to Bob on the occasion of his retirement from providing videography services to the town of Nags Head. Bob's faithful service capturing the commissioners' meetings on video will be missed. The excellent job and always pleasant attitude defined Bob's work ethic and will be hard to replace. The Nags Head Board of Commissioners appreciates the service Bob has provided, which began in 2003, and wishes him the very best. In witness thereof, the Nags Head Board of Commissioners has caused this certificate to be signed this 5th day of December 2012 by its mayor. So, sir, if you will put it on automatic for just a second. Bob, thank you. We wish you very much the best. You've really helped us increase our transparency to the public.
Thank you very much.
It's amazing how many folks stay up and watch your show.
Yes, they do.
Perry, we expect to see you back here in January. We'll see. Is there any further business to come before the board?
Can I make 2 things I forgot?
Please.
I apologize.
Yes, sir.
I did want to remind the board and everyone that does listen and watch that the annual Christmas decorating contest for the town is open to all Nags Head businesses and residences. We are taking entries until 5 p.m. December the 7th, and judging will be on December the 11th. We are going to have on December the 14th from 3:30 until 5 o'clock open house at Town Hall, where Town Hall will be decorated, and I think Perry, the chairman of the CAC, may have some caroling lined up. We'll have some light refreshments, Christmas cookies, and so we invite all of you and everyone to come December the 14th, 3:30 to 5 at Town Hall.
I'm going to Sanibel on the 14th.
And just real quick, the Community Watch luncheon that we spoke about earlier it's not a Whalebone restaurant, it's a Tail of the Whale restaurant at 1 o'clock. Just so everybody knows. Anything else, sir?
No.
We're gonna,
I don't believe you have a mid-month.
don't have a mid-month for
Motion to
December.
adjourn.
Yes, ma'am. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, like sign. The motion passes unanimously. We're adjourned.